This is America in Space, a weekly news and information program on current events dealing with the space industry.
Welcome, and thanks for joining me today. I'm Dawn Meyer, Space Coast News Editor. Polaris Dawn will be conducting a spacewalk on day 3 of their mission to test the new EVA spacesuits. The astronauts must pre-breathe oxygen for 2 days to purge as much nitrogen from their bodies as possible for the spacewalk, and the entire Dragon capsule will be brought to vacuum. Jared Isaacman, the mission commander, and Sarah Gillis, one of the mission specialists, will exit the capsule with the aid of the new Skywalker apparatus, which will help them get out of the capsule, while Scott Poteet and Anna Menon remain in the capsule. Isaacman talks a little bit about the spacesuit tests.
Primary objective for sure is about the suit to inform suit design changes. Secondary objective is the operations itself and what we can learn to improve upon it for the future. Ideally, working into a no pre-breathe state where people could truly put on a suit and exit a vehicle very, very quickly, as opposed to this, we have a multi-day pre-breathe, for example, on Polaris Dawn.
Gillis tells us about the modifications made to the Dragon capsule in preparations for the spacewalk.
So I'm going to take you through some of the modifications both to the spacecraft as well as the spacesuit. And what you'll see throughout these slides is that much of the development effort has really been focused on safely executing this spacewalk. Maybe first, I'm just going to paint a little bit more of a picture of the spacewalk and what to expect. So actually, about an hour onto orbit, we'll start preparations for the EVA, where we begin a pre-breathe protocol. And this pre-breathe is really designed to help. On flight day 2, we'll get pressurized in the suits and actually go through a mobility demo, where we step through the sequence and movements inside the spacecraft and really make sure there was nothing missed in our training, that we're confident before we step outside. And then flight day 3 is the spacewalk. So that morning, we'll go through system checkouts on both the life support system and the suits before all of us get pressurized on 100% oxygen. We'll complete the final pre-breathe on 100% oxygen before we vent the spacecraft. Once at vacuum, EV1 will open the hatch before EV1 and EV2 serially will go outside and complete the test matrix that Jared mentioned of suit mobility objectives. Once complete, EV2 will close the hatch, and then we'll proceed with repressing the spacecraft and then continue with the science and research for the remainder of the mission. So stepping into some of the spacecraft side modifications that were needed to actually accomplish this. One of the more substantial efforts was upgrades to the life support systems. This includes adding a lot more oxygen to the spacecraft so that we can feed oxygen to 4 suits through umbilicals for the full duration of the spacewalk. There have been upgrades and additions to the environmental sensing suite in the spacecraft to make sure we have really good insight both before, during, and after exposure to vacuum. And what you can see here is actually a new addition, an entirely new system, a nitrogen repress system. This is kind of a closeout shroud over 2 redundant nitrogen tanks that will be used to repressurize the spacecraft once we're complete with the EVA. With all of these life support system upgrades, obviously there's a ton of testing that needs to go into this. And that's both at a component level, but then also at a full-scale system level. So what you see here is the Dragon spacecraft actually going into a thermal vacuum chamber. And we ran the end-to-end sequence, both depressing the capsule, dwelling at vacuum, and then repressing the spacecraft using all the software, hardware, and integrated systems that we expect to use for this flight. Additionally, at vacuum, we performed a long-duration dwell on the interior at vacuum so that we could actually bake out a lot of the materials on the inside, remove some chemicals that would off-gas in the vacuum of space before we're actually in that environment. There's been a lot of addition of new mobility aids to support suited mobility in the spacecraft. So you're actually looking up through the top of the spacecraft here at what we call the Skywalker. And this is a new structure that's been added outside the forward hatch that we'll use during the spacewalk, both as a handhold and footholds for some of the testing we'll perform. There's also new handholds both around and on the forward hatch of the spacecraft for interior operations, as well as some new camera views both on the mobility aid and the nose cone to capture footage during the spacewalk. The forward hatch has also been upgraded to include a motor to assist with hatch opening. So next, getting into what I actually noticed is on all of your badges, which I love, development of the EVA suit. So here it is, first generation SpaceX EVA suit, and I think it just looks so cool. I know we're all just feel so grateful to be able to test out this piece of technology. So what you see here is a design evolution of the new EVA suit. It is a design evolution from the IVA suit, the intravehicular activity suit, and it includes all sorts of technology, including a heads-up display, a helmet camera, an entirely new architecture for joint mobility. There's thermal insulation throughout the suit, including a copper and indium tin oxide visor that both provides thermal protection and solar protection. And then throughout, there's all sorts of redundancy, both in the oxygen supply feed to the suit, as well as all of the valves, all of the seals across the suit. It's an incredible suit. It's been a long journey to get here. Another aspect of development on this journey, as Jared mentioned, since Dragon doesn't have an airlock, the entire spacecraft is going to be going to vacuum. And I mentioned this kind of novel pre-breathe protocol, where we're starting at about 14.5 psi and going down to about 8.65 as the last stage of our pre-breathe over a long period of time to slowly pull nitrogen out of our body and reduce our risk of decompression sickness. To validate this test, we actually spent 2 whole days in a vacuum chamber at NASA Johnson Space Center, and we went through the entire protocol, stepping down pressure and then ultimately performing a simulated EVA on breathing masks of 100% oxygen, stepping through the full operation. The final crewed test was actually wearing these incredible suits into the vacuum chamber. So we returned to Johnson Space Center, and we were in the front chamber, or the front airlock of the chamber B, and we went through basically a full depress sequence, dwell at vacuum, and repress, looking at some of the manual hatch operations in the chamber, but really getting to see firsthand what it'll feel like in the suits as we go to vacuum.
Isaacman marvels a little bit about how impressed he was using the vacuum chambers for the suit tests, the same chambers used by astronauts since the Mercury program.
I think you feel the same as you do the entire journey preparing for this mission. Is like you're just so fortunate to be able to be a fly on the wall, to all the history being made around you. And I really mean that. I mean, it's no different than, the Mercury, the Gemini, the Apollo astronauts who used these chambers, which is they were one component of an army of hundreds of thousands of people then, tens of thousands now in our case, that go into making this possible. So you just feel really fortunate to even be there. And you try and make the most of it. I mean, there's probably a few hundred people that have prepared for months, literally, for the vacuum chamber runs that we just did. And we just got to make the most of all their efforts, get good data out of it, and, be willing to do whatever it takes to make sure it was a worthwhile effort.
Polaris Dawn is such an exciting mission. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for listening from your home or where you work. And wherever you listen, be sure to like and follow us. Listen each Tuesday for This Week in Space with John Gomez. And join me every Friday for America in Space. From the Florida Space Coast, I'm Dawn Meyer, Space Coast News Editor for About Space Today.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to share our program with your family and friends and follow us on Facebook. Join us each week for news and information on America in Space.